Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I am on a recording for YouTube and the other channels that I have and simulcasting on X basis. I'm doing this on September 1st, and I will be releasing this shortly on all the channels. Please make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube: Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. If you'd like to help support the work that I do, you can go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can get the great products that I offer on my website or be a paid member to my Patreon channel. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. All the videos I do are for free, so please help support the work that I do. I don't put stuff behind a paywall. Now, Trump released on Truth Social and on X a statement demanding some accountability by Pfizer. I'm going to paraphrase what he stated in his post, that he received information, Trump received information that seems to be different than what the public receives from the trial data from Pfizer. Now, if you go back to either late 2021, maybe 2022, probably 2022, Pfizer had a request for records of their data to be held for 75 years. And that was overruled by a court order. So they told their investors through an earnings call that there was going to be information that comes out that Pfizer's inoculation is not as robust as what was originally stated in the early days of the crisis. Now, there's a multitude of reasons for this with this whole Operation Warp Speed. So the investors were told, I'm going from memory here, but it was either late 2021 or around 2022, probably 2022. And they were concerned that it was going to affect the stock price. In addition, they were forced to not hide the information for 75 years. Now, I stated a long time ago, early days, that the messenger RNA platforms aren't tested robustly for safety or effectiveness, especially long-term issues, because it was a new technology. And that there potentially could be a situation where you could have reverse transcription take place in the body, taking the messenger RNA, reverse transcribe, and then integrate into the genome. It has been found that integrating into the genome is actually easier than what was originally thought, pre-COVID era, through this human line 1 capability. In addition, Operation Warp Speed, because they were producing so much of the vials for these different companies that were providing at the time, in the United States, it was Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and Pfizer. Now, Pfizer did not have the same technology to be able to adequately make and package the messenger RNA within the lipid nanoparticle. So the technology, the biotechnology between Moderna and Pfizer was a lot different in terms of what the temperatures need to be for storage and the actual PEG 2000 recipe. The lipid nanoparticle is what wraps around the messenger RNA. So let's talk about slight differences of what was going on with the patents between Moderna and Pfizer. and why Pfizer was actually the worst of them, of these vaccines that we're talking about here. So you had Johnson & Johnson, that was the adenovirus vector. You had Moderna, messenger RNA with the lipid nanoparticle based on their patent technology. And then Pfizer, which is a messenger RNA with their own patent technology. Now, with that, temperatures, the lipid nanoparticle was more stable for storage and shipping for Moderna than for Pfizer. And so there was so temperatures had to be much colder to maintain the integrity of the messenger RNA for Pfizer. So temperatures for storage for Moderna could be higher, and the temperatures for Pfizer much colder to maintain stability. Now, when you're making the messenger RNA, independent if it's Moderna or Pfizer, it goes through a process, a pretty lengthy process. You're producing a messenger RNA, but how do you produce that messenger RNA? The first part of that is to actually have a plasmid. They use the SV40 plasmid with DNA code that's inserted into the plasmid vector. And they produce in vitro a batch of messenger RNA. So this plasmid is creating the messenger RNA. And then they have to filter it out. They have to go through a filtration process. So when they eventually filter it out, then you have the messenger RNA that has to be wrapped in with the lipid nanoparticle. And there is a recipe to make the PEG 2000. When they wrap it, it's possible that the wrapping doesn't fully package the messenger RNA. So in some lipid nanoparticles, under the microscope, you'll see no messenger RNA in it. In others, it'll package the whole messenger RNA. And in other cases, you will see situation where the lipid nanoparticle will not have the whole messenger RNA, it will only have pieces of it. May have the front end of it, or the back end of the messenger RNA, or the middle, but it'll be fragmented. So so in these vials, there's a different levels of integrity of the messenger RNA within the lipid nanoparticle. This is true for Moderna and for Pfizer, but with Pfizer, it was more prevalent. All right, so they go towards the testing phase of this for the trials, and what they started to notice is there were adverse side effects, and these adverse side effects were not fully disclosed during the process. All right, and in addition, they also looked at titer levels. So you had adverse side effects with the clinical trials, and the titer levels were less than expected, especially when compared to Moderna. So what did they do? They started to, and they knew that their manufacturing process was not as robust as what Moderna had. So what they do is that they allowed for more plasmids to be actually packaged into the vaccine. So in terms of safety, in an ideal situation with the messenger RNA, you would have just the lipid nanoparticle, and that's packaged the messenger RNA, and that's in a fluid, and that's frozen or cooled at a very cold temperature. That's not frozen, but cooled at a very cold temperature, and then shipped to a facility that's going to administer the shots. In a perfect world, it would be just the solution, the adjuvant, the lipid nanoparticle with the messenger RNA. In reality, you have these fragments. You have broken up lipid nanoparticles. You have fragments of the messenger RNA within the lipid nanoparticle, not the whole thing. And you may even have messenger RNA debris in there, in addition to the adjuvants and some of the upstream material that made the messenger RNA, such as the plasmid. Okay? As long as it's at a small concentration, it's considered safe. But in Pfizer's case, because they had problems with packaging the lipid nanoparticle, packaging the messenger RNA, making the messenger RNA, they had to spike it with a plasmid, this SV40 plasmid, and not filter out as much of it. So there was part of the problem with the messenger RNA platform is the filtration process, because you still have whatever vector you use to make the messenger RNA is in the vaccine. And so you're getting a shot of the lipid nanoparticle with the messenger RNA, with debris, with potentially a certain amount of plasmid. If it's at a very low concentration for the plasmid, it shouldn't do anything to the body, any adverse. But if it's at higher concentrations, you got a problem. Because what happens is at higher concentrations, it's going to break tolerance and start affecting tissue. Okay, so with Pfizer, they had higher concentrations of this because they needed it to create higher levels of titers in the body to be able to compete with Moderna, on top of hiding the issue of the real robustness of their lipid nanoparticle and messenger RNA producing an S1 subunit in the body. So with Pfizer, some people were developing S1 subunits from the messenger RNA because it's properly packaged. Other people were actually developing the S1 and S2, producing the S1 and S2 subunits from the plasmid that was in the actual vaccine. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous. Because with plasmids, you have much higher chances of tissue damage, cellular damage, integration in the genome. Because you use plasmids outside of the body, in vitro, in petri dishes, in tissue cultures, to modify genes or to express certain types of, you're manipulating the cell. All right. So if you have if you have high concentrations of a plasmid in the vaccine, you're increasing the chances of genomic integration and adverse side effects, and higher concentrations of the S1 and S2 subunit, way beyond what you need to elicit an immune response. And this is what they were hiding. So it's important to understand that they had a manufacturing problem. They had a problem with the way the body produces the antibodies at a lower titer level compared to other vaccines because of their manufacturing process. So they spike it. They allow for more plasmids to be in the vaccine, and voila, you have genomic integration, more vaccine injury. Now, fast forward to what we know today. During this time period, there were actually two different VIIRS databases. There was one for the public, and there was one that was not for the public. And the one that was not for the public, the VIIRS database showed more vaccine injury, and that's across the board. Now, I don't know the percentages of how much more for, let's say, Johnson & Johnson in the public VIIRS compared to the private, or for Moderna or for Pfizer. I don't know that level of detail, but there were two databases for VIIRS. And there was a private one and there was a public one. And the private one had higher levels of vaccine injury. So it's important to realize that during this 2021, 2022 disclosure, probably in 2022, by Pfizer to the investors when they did their earnings call, they stated that they had problems and that it was going to affect sales and that less people were going to actually do the boosters because of the efficacy of the vaccine. There was issues with it. So Pfizer was trying to hide it because of financial reasons, because there was a lot of money to be made during the Warp Speed program, the Operation Warp Speed. They knew that their manufacturing process was subpar to Moderna. They knew that they were having problems with titer levels when compared to the other vaccines. So they spiked it. So manufacturing problems, and then they spiked it with this SV40 plasmid that is used upstream to make the actual messenger RNA. So that's kind of the backstory of what's going on with Pfizer. Now, is there manufacturing problems with Moderna? Yes. You can't filter completely the plasmids. There are always going to be some concentration of plasmids in the vaccine. So there's going to be some problems with messenger RNA shots. This is the reason why Johnson & Johnson was available at the time. Because during Warp Speed, they didn't know if the messenger RNA platform would work. And so they knew that adenovirus vectors for vaccines was a well-established platform for at least a couple decades. And so the process to make it and have it safe and effective and the variables involved in the manufacturing were much more established than during the messenger RNA Operation Warp Speed days for Moderna or for Pfizer. So that was the reason why Johnson & Johnson was available. Now, if you remember, Johnson & Johnson was demonized saying, oh, there's blood clotting, not realizing that some of that blood clotting was actually from the virus, SARS-CoV-2. And some of that, all right, so they were demonized and they said, okay, Johnson & Johnson said that they will discontinue and that there was only going to be a messenger RNA. And so it was a battle between Pfizer and Moderna. Now you got to remember, Moderna was the darling from DARPA. So Pfizer wanted a piece of the action. Johnson & Johnson decided that they were going to get out of it. They were not going to go into messenger RNA technology, right, at that time. I don't know if they're playing around with messenger RNA in the laboratory. I don't know that. But at least in terms of SARS-CoV-2, Johnson & Johnson decided to bail out. And so you had a lot of anti-vaxxers that were saying, oh, we won with the, getting rid of Johnson & Johnson, not realizing that other people were getting boosters, and the only boosters that were available, they shouldn't get boosters, period. I'll discuss that in this video, but you don't need a booster, period. But the thing is that there were many people that were getting boosters, but not having Johnson & Johnson available forced people to only have messenger RNA, which led to further vaccine injury. So the anti-vaxxers actually caused, in part of this issue with the boosters, the anti-vaxxers actually made it worse by not having another available platform that was an adenovirus platform instead of the messenger RNA. Messenger RNA is terrible. It's terrible. It's dangerous. We don't know what we're doing with it. That's the problem. All right. So but it's quick, and there was a reason for it, and I will explain why. So it's important sometimes when someone thinks that they're winning on the battlefield, especially with this over inoculation stuff during the COVID era, they thought they were winning by getting rid of Johnson & Johnson. They didn't. Johnson & Johnson's the safer one. And not just that, why many, more than 50% of the people that were affiliated with Warp Speed, I'm talking about the ones that actually were part of Warp Speed. Many of them chose the Johnson & Johnson and not the Moderna. Okay, so people need to realize that these very polarized opinions about inoculations, about vaccines, can cause negative externalities if you get what you want. And in this case, by the ones that were picking a booster route, taking boosters, by not having Johnson & Johnson, it actually made it worse. Because the only option they had was a messenger RNA platform, and they could have either picked, they could mix and match the way this was, it could be mixed and matched. So some people may have started with Moderna and had boosters with Pfizer and vice versa. But they couldn't do that with Johnson & Johnson because it was taken off the market. So basically, there is a national security state that's pushing for Moderna. Right? And that's another aspect to this that you have to pay attention to. You demonize Pfizer and you only have Moderna, which is DARPA. And this is part of the bioshield for bioweapons. And so this is a very complex situation here that people do not understand the complexity. I don't even think the president understands the complexity because honestly, I don't think he was aware that there was a bioweapon development of the SARS platform. Okay, so, all right. Johnson & Johnson's off because of concern of blood clots. But the blood clots are happening. This clotting issue is happening with the messenger RNA platforms too. So it's it's not the platform. It's the S1 subunit that's causing the clots. The S1 subunit is the spike of the virus. It's enhanced because of the serial passage from Barrick's lab. So it's not the platform that's the problem. It's the S1 subunit that's the problem for the clotting. Okay, and the lipid nanoparticle also has exacerbates an inflammatory response and causes a problem along the endothelial lining of the blood vessel. So that's the reason why you have these really strange clots that look stringy. So you have the S1 subunit causing clotting. You have the lipid nanoparticle irritation that's causing the clotting, and you have this pro-inflammatory cytokine surge that's happening. Now with Johnson & Johnson, you had the S1 subunit, so you're getting the clotting from that, but you don't have the lipid nanoparticle. So actually the blood clotting was actually less with Johnson & Johnson, not more. So people that were anti-vaxxers, you were cornered to push for something that you didn't even know what you were doing. And so the national security state got rid of a potential competitor to Moderna for this. And the next phase is to get rid of Pfizer. So the only one standing is Moderna. Okay. So, all right. So you had that dynamic that was going on. So you have this hidden VIIRS of vaccine injury and the public one, where researchers could look at, physicians could look at, but there was a private one that only a certain closed group of people could see. Now, I don't know if the president saw that or not. But the president is saying, Pfizer, you were showing me data that said it was safe and effective. And other people are saying it's not. What the hell is going on? Pfizer is going, there's going to be a light shine on Pfizer that will prove what I'm saying. And I said this a long time ago. I said this more than 3 years ago that this was going to happen. So this is not news to me. It's news to the president, but it's not news to me. I said that this was a problem. It was such a problem with the temperatures between Pfizer and Moderna, they had to have temperature sensors while they were shipping it with FedEx and accelerometers. Because if the bottles shake too much, it would disturb the lipid nanoparticle and disrupt the messenger RNA. So these kits that they were put in for shipping were heavily monitored. They had a GPS on it, they had an accelerometer, and they had a temperature sensor. Most vaccines don't have that. This was such a very sensitive vial because it's not a stable shot. It's not a stable vaccine. Okay. So if it's not a stable vaccine, if you don't thaw it right, if it's not made properly, if it's not packaged properly, the lipid nanoparticles not wrapping the messenger RNA properly, you're going to have problems. So the chances of having problems are being shown in the VIRs. So, okay, what sort of problems can happen with messenger RNA? You can have clotting. You can have genomic integration. How? The messenger RNA can go into reverse transcription and integrate with your genome, or have the plasmid that was used upstream to make the messenger RNA that's packaged into the vaccine vial on purpose or because of filtration process problems that leads to integration. You can have vaccine injury on overproduction of the S1 and S2 subunit. So there's too much spikes, and then what happens is there's shedding out of the cell that it's being produced, and it starts to get into the extracellular matrix and into the bloodstream and into your lymphatic system and cause problems. So you have the S1 subunit shedding within tissue. You can have shedding outside the body, and you can have shedding outside of certain tissues or outside of certain cells. The term shedding is used the same way. Most people that say the term shedding, they mean from one person to another, but there's also cellular shedding. So you have that problem. Then you have overproduction of antibodies causing an autoimmune response. So there's a lot of things that can happen here with the messenger RNA platform. But you can get genomic integration from the virus. It's not as prevalent, but it does happen. Now, it happens to be that the S1 subunit, the S1 and S2 subunit, is a tumor suppressor inhibitor for P53. That's part of the reason why you have turbo cancer. But the virus has more than just one protein. It has an S protein, an M protein, right? So it has a bunch of these different proteins that can create other combinations to be tumor suppressor inhibitors. So actually, if you have a high level of viral load in tissue that is teetering on being cancerous, by having an infection, a natural infection, actually can lead to tumors to grow faster. So tumors can grow faster by the inoculation or the virus. And this is why I keep on saying there's no perfect solution. There is no perfect solution. You got to take your poison. If you're high risk, you might pick the choice of taking the inoculation, but you have all these potential negative effects. But if you don't, you might get the virus, and you might be benign and nothing happens to you. But there are a lot of people that are getting tumors, accelerated tumors, that were not vaccinated. And there are a lot of people that were vaccinated that are getting aggressive tumors. It's the S1 subunit. What's the common thing of the two? It's the S1 and S2 subunit. So it's really important to understand the nuance. And I've been screaming this for 5 fucking years. And no one was paying attention. So I'm not surprised that Trump is actually waking up and seeing, well, you know what? Wait a minute. Pfizer lied. Yeah, Pfizer said they lied in 2022 to their investors. Just roll back the investor tape that's probably on their website. So now the question is, there's a bigger problem. It's not about Pfizer. It's about a weapons program, a biological weapons program that the United States and other countries have been doing. And in this case, it was the SARS platform that was started in 2001 in April. 2001 in April was the SARS platform. Now, in the normal nomenclature, in today's nomenclature, we call it SARS-CoV-1. But that was the beginnings. So you have this need for bioweapon development and the need for therapeutics. Now, the therapeutics are divided in 2 different categories: vaccinations and antivirals. So you have this sword and shield, a bioshield and a sword. The thing is that the bioshield with the messenger RNA platform, which they thought was going to be working, and that DARPA invested a lot of money and pushed Moderna with, didn't work. So now we have a weapon that has been released and circulating around the world and mutating, that was enhanced to hit multiple receptors because of the serial passage that went through Wuhan and through Barrick's lab in the United States. And there's no real bioshield. The bioshield hurts you. But now everyone has antibodies of some level, either from natural infection and or from the inoculation. So it kind of holds it down, but the bioweapon is endemic now. And I kept on saying, if you don't shut down the bioweapon labs, you're going to have a major problem. And I said that right before Omicron happened. And Omicron was another release. And by releasing that, more people were infected. The time to shut the lab was before Omicron. But it's too late now. You can't, it's out of the box. We're in biowarfare now. But it's like a Cold War kind of biowarfare. Just like how Oppenheimer and his team at Los Alamos created the bomb, and Truman dropped the bomb on Japan. Once it's made, once people know how to make it and other countries make something similar, there's an arms race. So there's an arms race with bioweapons with Western nations and Eastern nations. The Chinese are making bioweapons. The United States are making bioweapons. We're in a bioweapon Cold War. And so if you're in that, what do? You can't shut down the labs now, because now you have to have mutual assured destruction. And the only way is to have more bioshields. There's the only technology out there, even though it sucks, that is fast, is the messenger RNA platform. There's nothing else, even though it sucks. That's the problem we have. So when Trump sees Pfizer, you're going to have a lot of truthers and a lot of anti-vaxxers that don't see the big picture. And that is, we're already in a Cold War with bioweapons that have been released. So what are you going to do? Now you have AI that can radically, I can personally take AI and construct a brand new virus and customize what I want to hit. And my resources are limited compared to what's in Stargate. Stargate is a bioweapons program. All right. So what do you do? What do you do? We're actually at that moment in time when the nuclear age starts with nuclear weapons, and you have now a competitor where, you know, Truman originally thought it was only the United States and he had hubris. And then all of a sudden Stalin tests his weapon, and now you have an arms race. Well, there's an arms race that's going on with biologics now. What do you do? What do you do? Just stop it? Oh, just say stop it? Do you think the Chinese are going to just stop making gain of function bioweapons? And then we're going to have to do the same, make something faster, better, whatever. This thing is going to get out of control. It's a problem. It's a big problem. So Trump, hopefully he wakes up to this, but it's not just Pfizer. Pfizer and the issues with them hiding and what they did with the plasmid to spike it so they can get the titer levels up because their process sucked. Their manufacturing process sucked. Their patents sucked. That's only the surface level. It gets deeper on why they needed the bioshield. And that is because we're making bioweapons. And you need shields for it. And the barriers of entry are a lot lower than nuclear weapons. That's the problem. But, you know, people thought that they knew better. People want to sit in their little bullshit life and think that everything's going to be okay and have cognitive dissonance that nations are not developing viruses that harm. The reality is it is. They are. They are doing this. This is happening. And there needs to be a bioshield. And this is now elevated to a point, just like with nuclear weapons, what's the foreign policy? We don't have a foreign policy for biological warfare like we have with nuclear. So it's the Wild West now. What's going on? What's going on here? So that is my take on what's happening with Trump and his little post on Truth Social and on X about he's demanding Pfizer to show the data and, you know, to get to the bottom of was Operation Warp Speed effective or not? Was it brilliant? I think he called it. You know, and the reality of the situation was Warp Speed had problems. The country was in a crisis, and that people needed antibodies. And there were only three ways to get antibodies. You get the infection and you're on monoclonals. There weren't enough monoclonals for everybody. Get the natural infection and hope for the best. And in some cases, people did that and they weathered the storm. Other people did that and they died. And I know, I saw it. All right. And there were other people that decided to take a vaccine. And unfortunately, some people still died from just the vaccine and from the infection from SARS-CoV-2. That in some cases the vaccine didn't help. In other cases, it did help. So there's a whole landscape of different cohorts on how this affected the human body. It's not cookie cutter. But the anti-vaxxers and the pro-vaxxers, they think it's all perfect in one way or the other. All the anti-vaxxers think that, oh, the virus was nothing. and that it was all the inoculations that caused the harm. Wrong. And the pro-vaxxers think that no harm was being created and that everything was above board. But that's not true, because Pfizer even admits that they were hiding the data and that there were two versions of beers. So even the pro-vaxxers are wrong. There's a nuance here that people need to pay attention to, and I've been trying to scream at the top of my lungs for more than 5 years about this particular subject. And there's nobody out there that knows this subject matter better than I do. Nobody. So now the question is, and I'll prove that I know more than anybody out there on this subject matter. We are now in an era where we need a foreign policy for biological warfare. So now we got to have people like myself that have brains to actually go, if the Chinese are making a weapon that affects our immune system, how do we counter it with a bioshield? And how do we create a virus that affects their population? Because we're in a fucking war now. What's the foreign policy in biological warfare? Because we're in it. That's my take on what's going on with Trump. Hopefully he wakes up and shows a light on the biological warfare program of SARS that goes all the way back to 2001 and financed by Fauci and Barrick's lab. Thank you for listening and have a nice day. Make sure that you help support my work by getting the great products that I have on my store. I tell you how to mitigate, right? And I also, if you pay attention, you can slow down the aging process. And if you like the work that I do and you're learning from it, please help support by getting the products and by donating. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. But I am not wrong on this, and I have not been wrong for more than 5 years on this crisis. I told you what was going to happen, what was happening, what was going to happen, and the aftershocks that we're going through. Now, in terms of, there's one thing I want to add. In terms of the boosters, and everyone's saying, these professionals are saying, oh, you need a booster. I mean, Jay Tapper from CNN, the professional doctor, is saying, you need a booster. Everyone needs a booster, blah, blah, blah. You don't. If you had an infection or if you already had an inoculation, you do not need a booster. You do not need a new epitope shot, an update that's been rejiggered. Why? Because you have memory cells, B and T memory cells. And you also have these titer levels will maintain for 10 years. So if you think you need a booster, you're a fucking idiot. Please go to my website and help support the work that I do. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.